Now, newly unearthed tapes in the United States have revealed that former President Ronald Reagan described Africans as monkeys. The comment was made in 1971 when Mr. Reagan was governor of California. He was speaking on the phone to the then President Richard Nixon about his frustration at Tanzanian delegates who sided against the U.S. in a vote at the United Nations. Members of the delegation started dancing after the UN voted to recognize China and expel Taiwan. Let's listen to some of that tape.
And last night, I tell you, to watch that thing on television as I did,
yeah,
to see those monkeys from those African countries, damn them, they're still uncomfortable wearing shoes.
Well, and then the tail wags the dog there, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The tail wags the dog.
Let's get some more on that story now from a former advisor on Africa to former U.S. President Barack Obama, Grant T. Harris. Grant, I mean, this has come as a rude and certainly hurtful shock to many of the Africans that I've been speaking to about the story. Was President Ronald Reagan racist?
I think that's a question where scholars will weigh in and go to his meaning about his policies, but I think that's clearly racist to say, and I can't defend it. I don't think anyone would. I don't know how much that motivated all of his policies, as I was saying, but there's simply no excuse for any language or thinking or prejudice like that.
And do you think such feelings within him would have affected his policy towards Africa and indeed towards the African-American population there in the U.S.?
I think that's possible. I think that it's well known that President Reagan supported the apartheid government in South Africa. He spoke out in favor of Rhodesia as well, and his policies toward users of welfare in the United States and calling people welfare queens in the United States, I think will be looked at in a new light in terms of what his motivations were. I think the real issue here is that it's clearly racist, it's inexcusable. I do think that U.S. policy toward Africa is deeper than that and filled, of course, with a vast majority of individuals that would completely renounce that don't see Africa that way, that don't view Africans that way.
Well, you say that, Grant, but a lot of Africans will say, well, nothing has changed since Ronald Reagan was governor of California. Here we are, almost 50 years later, and we've got a president in the White House who uses derogatory words to describe African countries.
That's certainly true in terms of what President Trump has said. And we don't need to look back at the historical record of 1971 to see a racist utterance from a U.S. leader. Unfortunately, we need only look at Twitter as of this morning or any previous days. And I can't defend those comments, and I won't, by President Trump or anyone else who's ever used racist language. I think the issue is that leaders come in all forms, some good, some bad, and some with prejudice and some without. I was an advisor to President Obama, an advisor to President Clinton, and I've seen U.S. presidents that don't have that view and that understand fundamentally why it's so important for the U.S. to have strong relationships with African states and communities.
And Grant, very briefly, is there a fear that when a lot of people hear words like this coming from their leaders, it empowers them to use such language against, Africans? I mean, I'm talking recently basically about the send her back chants at President Trump rally.
I think it does personally, and that's why I hate to see such language. I hate to see such thinking. We're above that. We need to be above that. We cannot tolerate such utterances. I just think that it's important to understand that countries have leaders, good and bad, and it doesn't speak for all the people in the country, of course. And so we need to denounce this. We need to denounce what President Trump is saying that has racist intonation. And I think that we need to continue to tell our leaders that it's unacceptable to talk that way or to think that way.
Grant T. Harris, former advisor on Africa to President Barack Obama. Thank you very much for your insight into this story.